I had wanted to say at some point today that for those of you here that want to develop in this way, in the way we've been speaking about during this retreat, it's important that you make time to do what we've been doing here every day, even though I said it's not that important. And for the two reasons, the one, was that it? Was that was it something else you wanted to ask?
No, that was it,
okay.
Andrew, thank you.
So the two reasons are, one is so you can discover and rediscover yet again that the deepest nature of your own self is freedom itself. The nature of the deepest part of yourself that's never been born and never entered the stream of time is freedom itself. So that's why you want to be doing this very regularly. That's number one. And the other reason is so you can discover, rediscover, and rediscover again and again and again and again and again and again and again that the mind is a mechanical process that has no self-nature. Now, we can't know those two truths well enough, can we? If we aspire to be a liberated human being, we can't aspire to know those two truths enough, isn't that right? So one is that the deepest nature of our own being is inherent freedom. The deepest nature of your own self, the deepest nature of my own self, is inherent freedom. So we can't know that truth deeply enough, can we? Right? I can't hear you. One more time. One more time. Thank you very much. Because it's true, isn't it? Because you have to remember, we're all here now, and this is all very obvious. But remember, it's not always so obvious to us. That's the problem. You see? Why do we need to do this all? Because we want these deepest truths that we've been sharing together and talking about to remain self-evident, obvious. Right? And it's important that these deepest truths remain self-evident and obvious to us. So that's why we want to put some time into this every day. You want to become pretty good at this. And the other is to know that the mind has no self-nature, that it's a mechanical process. We can't know that deeply enough. So that's why you want to do this as a form of spiritual self-discipline. Because, life is very challenging for all of us. It's just very challenging, and the mind is the mechanism through which we relate to self and world. Right? Isn't that right? Mind is the mechanism through which we relate to self and world. So we want to be able to do it with the greatest skill and appropriateness. Nobody's perfect, but we want to strive for a much higher level of engagement with the world, with self and other, self, other, and world. And so the way to do that is being aware with what we're actually working with, what's actually going on here. You follow? So we can't be informed enough that the mind has no self-nature and it's a mechanical process. Because the minute you forget that, we get in all kinds of trouble. So in order to cultivate a real facility with this awakening to enlightened awareness, you want to try and do this as much as you can. So I know everybody's very busy, but if you can do an hour in the morning every day, that would be just incredible. Even though an hour is not much, it's a lot better than nothing. And what you want to try and do is at least one day a week to put some real time into it. And also you have to remember that doing spiritual practice in earnest, if you're earnest, if you're not earnest, it doesn't matter. But if you're earnest, it means your intention is earnest, which is different than the quality of your experience, which is a whole other thing. It has merit. There's inherent merit. Have you heard of the whole notion of merit? Spiritual merit. It means it's a good thing to do. It's good. It's inherently good. The spiritual merit. So when you do spiritual practice in earnest, when your motivation is earnest motivation, there's merit in the doing of the practice itself, not because of any particular result. So, for example, if you do a spiritual practice and it has a marvelous result, you say, wow, that was fantastic. I want to do that again. It really works. Okay, so then you appreciate the value because it gave a certain result. But there's a much deeper dimension to all this, which is the practice done in earnest has inherent merit or value in and of itself. The ego says, really? I can't believe it. How can sitting here going crazy have merit? He's got to be nuts. There's much more important things I could actually be getting something done. I'm just here torturing myself for no reason. I'm not getting anything out of this. It's horrible. It hurts my body. It's emotionally frustrating. It's psychologically exasperating. He's got to be kidding. He must be insane. But that's your ego is drawing the conclusions. So why is it, for example, if you see somebody doing spiritual practice in earnest, it's very moving? So, for example, I remember in Bodh Gaya in northern India, which is a small village, which is the pilgrimage site, which is the site of the Bodhi tree, which is the Buddha's, where the Buddha had his famous awakening experience. I remember being there in the winter and seeing these very old Tibetan women, old and hobbled over, doing these prostrations in the dirt and on the stone and on the stones, prostrating all around this stupa. Old women, who probably were in their 70s, looked like it to me, and I was like, wow. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, the devotion and the commitment in those simple acts of devotion. What did I do? Sorry. Anyway, you get the idea. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, it really stunned me to see that. And also, if you see somebody, for example, if you see somebody being very still, just absolutely still with total presence, and if you just bear witness, it's inherently beautiful. That, regardless of whatever the internal or subjective experience of whoever that person may be, I'm just saying there's something happening that's very beautiful, inherently beautiful. It has inherent significance. And even if you learn about prayer, and as prayer gets more sophisticated, more involved, it's not about getting anything for yourself. It's not, please, Daddy, give me this and give me that. It's a profound kind of opening to reality, and something very beautiful you can see in people's physical form. Something very beautiful begins to emanate through people, through their physical form and their posture, because of what the position they're taking in relationship to reality. So these all have inherent, when all of these things are done in earnest, there's inherent merit. In other words, it's good for you, no matter what your internal experience may be, when these practices are done in earnest. If they're not done in earnest, if your ego's saying, oh, come on, then you are wasting your time. If your ego's the one who's doing it, you're wasting your time, and there's no merit at all. You're just making a fool out of yourself, really. So I know everybody's busy, and life is, very busy. But I just want everybody to keep this in mind, because it is very important that there is inherent merit in spiritual practice that's approached with the correct motivation. And the issue here is whatever you're doing, here we've been looking at this through the art and what I call the art and science of stillness, but it's important to take out time in order to develop. So however you're going to do it, we all need to take time out to develop. You will not develop if you don't take time out to do it. Very simple. So it's just that simple, and I want to encourage everybody to make sure that you take time and make time for your own actual development, because that's the most important thing. In an evolutionary context, that's the most important thing.